For everyone getting into metal detecting, this is what you're going to find a lot of if you're walking around out in the woods. Useless, not so old shotgun shells, but they're kind of interesting nonetheless. So I'll show you some of the ones that I've found, some of the ones that are garbage, some of the ones that are maybe not so much garbage. They're probably not very much value in any of them, especially these I'm starting off with. But later on, we're going to get into some of the ones that I think are pretty interesting. So hang in there with me, and we'll get through some of these relatively newer ones. Still one I haven't ever seen before, Remington Peters 20 gauge shotgun shells. Found several of them out here in the woods. Somebody must have been doing a little squirrel hunting or small game hunting of some kind, maybe bird hunting. Found at least 2 or 3 of these Remington Peters shotgun shells. Haven't looked up any information about them just yet, but I might get into that one of these days. One of the more interesting ones that I did find, though, however, besides the 20 gauge shells, is one that's coming up next. It's a small little 410, probably somewhere between the mid 1960s to 1980s, and it's got a WW on the head stamp. Now, what I've come to determine is that stood for Winchester Western, because Winchester bought out the Western brand. So I thought that one was kind of interesting. Some of you guys might remember that. Not that old of a shotgun shell, but still pretty interesting to me. Again, 1960s to 1980s, Winchester Western 410 shotgun shell. Alright, so now we're going to get into some of the older ones that I found. So this one of these newer ones was one of the ones that kind of interested me most. Western Expert 16 gauge, probably sometime after 1964, since it is made from a plastic shell, but I just thought that Western was kind of interesting. But again, I still haven't seen too many of these Peters Remington shells either. So 20 gauge, 16 gauge, 410, 3 different sizes. Later on, when I get into some of the older ones, the primary gauge of the shell that I find is actually 12 gauge. Seems like that's probably one of the most common, most popular gauge shells that were used in hunting. Alright, now let's get started with a few of the more interesting ones. This first one, maybe not so much. It's a Remington Express 12 gauge. From what I can dig up about it, it's probably a mid 1960s. I didn't clean it up enough to see what it says around the outside, but I think it says Remington UMC. Looked like it might have been separated with an arrow. So that one I thought was pretty neat. It was kind of neat. It's one I haven't found very many of. From what I can tell, it's probably from around mid-30s, just my guess. I think they were manufactured between 1929 and 1946. It says REM UMC. It's REM UMC, number 12, which is 12 gauge, Sure Shot. And you can see that line goes all the way around to the S and then stops. Here's another mid-30s REM UMC New Club, probably manufactured between 1914 and 1937. This is a little bit worse, so you can't quite read it as much, but it does have that star around the firing pin. REM UMC number 12 New Club. So I think someone did a lot of hunting around the mid-30s around here. So it's kind of some old ones. Here's another REM UMC New Club, same time frame, probably between 1914 and 1937 from what I can find online about it. I think these are kind of interesting. I didn't really know too much about shotgun shells. Didn't know that they had paper linings when they were older. Didn't know that they had to come up with a new type of shell that would generate less smoke. So these were from probably the heavily smoked shotgun shells. Got one more, the REM UMC New Club number 12. So for a while I weren't finding same shells, but then evidently I found one that they like quite a bit. So yeah, we got 3 of the REM or Remington UMC. So that was predating Remington UMC Co. A little bit older than Remington, but I guess Remington bought out UMC. Then the New Club shells. These all have that star around them. They probably came out of the same box. So somebody was either doing a little squirrel hunting, bird hunting, what have you, and left the shells where they lay. So those were kind of neat. Next one's kind of neat. It's one of my Western shells. It's 20 gauge Super X. Western made in the USA Super X. Now, from what I can tell online, some people think that because it has that made in the USA on it, that it was probably a little bit older. This one I'm not too sure about since it has this longer shank around the outside. I think that possibly this could have been a plastic shelled casing, but just not too sure. If it was paper, this could have been from 1927 to 1932. But now this one, this was definitely old. Western Expert, 16 gauge, Western Expert. I'd say this one's got to be late 20s to early 30s. It does not have made in the USA on it, so that to me kind of indicates that it might be a little bit older. Then we have another Western Expert. This one's a 12 gauge though, so around the same time period, but this one does have the made in the USA on it, so I'm not too sure if that one, indicates anything or not, but it's definitely an old one, so I'm going to lean toward being late 20s to early 30s instead of the 1964 after time period. It just seems like this one's quite a bit older than that time frame. So we got two Western Experts at least. Found a lot more of the newer ones, the plastic shanked shells, but this one's got to be one of the older ones. This next one, talk about being in bad shape, does not say made in the USA on it. Western Field 12 gauge. This one looks like it's been run over by a truck or shot by another shotgun or something. This one's in rough shape, but it is one of the older ones that I found. Western Field, probably somewhere between 1914 and the mid 1930s. Just seems to be a popular time to be hunting around these parts. Next up we have another Western. This time this is one of the older ones that I've ever found. Western New Chief 12 gauge. It has a diamond pattern around the firing pin, and it's from what I can tell manufactured between 1898, and they stopped manufacturing the New Chief in 1914. So that is definitely one of the oldest shotgun shell head stamps that I have ever found, and it's just pretty neat. Western New Chief number 12 with diamond pattern around the firing pin. It's got to be from the early 1900s since it was manufactured sometime between 1898 and 1914. Definitely one of my favorite head stamps. I probably will never find another one. I don't get out and do a lot of detecting, so to find this out in the middle of the woods is just really pretty interesting to me. I love to think about the time period that someone would have fired this. They would have definitely been looking for a meal. Here's another neat one, UMC New Club number 12. New UMC, like I mentioned before, predates Remington. Maybe one of my oldest ones besides that New Chief that I just showed you. The UMC I just learned not too long ago, they were operated from around 1866 until 1911 when they then merged with the Remington Company. So that's kind of interesting. UMC manufactured between 1866 and 1911 possibly. And then this is the last one that I found actually. I'm not sure if it's the last one going to be in this video, but it's the last one that I found. US Co number 12, made in the USA, Climax. So this one's pretty neat too. Probably just a mid-1920s head stamp, U.S. Cartridge Company, United States Cartridge Company, U.S. Co. And then the UMC, Union Metallic Cartridge Company. All predate Remington. So we're going to try to get a shot of all the ones that I've just ran through and showed you. We have some Western Experts, some Western Fields, some Western New Clubs, the Western New Chief, Rim UMC Sure Shot, Rim UMC New Clubs. It's just kind of interesting. You never know what you're going to dig up from out in the woods. And then we have some of our plastic cartridges. It's not very old, probably sometime between the 60s and 80s, just guessing. Some of them I couldn't make out what they said on the top. Some were those Remington Peters. Pretty interesting head stamp collection. See what we find. You guys don't forget to like and subscribe, and appreciate the views. See you next time.